it's 9. We're going to wait another minute or so, see if some more people come in. Not that many here yet. Goodness, so are you guys all in Portales, or are you spread out all over the place?
I'm in Albuquerque.
You're in Albuquerque. Okay, you're going to get the cold front as well then this weekend, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's looking a bit insane for Sunday over here. I think Albuquerque, and we're going over to our RV. It's not meant to be quite as cold. But yeah, maybe there'll be snow. That would be good for the ski areas. So it has been a very peculiar winter. But I must admit, it's going to be a bit difficult going from 73 to 22 or whatever it's meant to be on Sunday. Okay, well, I think we'll get started, and hopefully a couple more people will jump in here. So we're going to look at some of the information from chapter 2. Do jump in anytime if you've got questions, or if you have comments, or if you've got experiences that you can share. Jump on in so that you don't have to just listen to me glittering on here. So I wanted to point out, before I made this full size, that I have the link on the front slide of this PowerPoint is the link to the ENMU counseling services. So just in case any of you need to talk to anybody, or you have friends that you think need to talk to anybody, then that link is there and they're available to help you. So use that resource if you need to. Okay, don't try to manage on your own if you're struggling, which is what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Okay. So, what are some of the things that can influence our psychological or mental health? And sometimes I think we don't always realize the role that our nervous system plays. And just an aside, the picture here is was a person. It's an actual, I don't even know what you can call it, but it's an extraction of their entire nervous system. So you can see the brain and the spinal cord and many of the peripheral nerves they managed to save and take out. So it's quite amazing. This picture comes from a exhibition called The Body. There's another one that I think has a similar name. If you're interested in the human body and in movement, and you ever get the opportunity to go to that exhibition, I highly recommend it. It's a little bit expensive to get in, but you'll spend hours in there. You know, it's money well spent. It's absolutely fascinating. You get the opportunity. You know, nothing looks the same for real as a picture in a textbook, right? So it's a fascinating setup. So we have, if you haven't done any anatomy yet, we have two main divisions of our nervous system. our central nervous system, which comprises the brain and the spinal cord, and then everything outside of that is called the peripheral nervous system. And that can play a large role because it's capable of putting us into a state that we call fight or flight. So that's our kind of very aroused, very aware, very kind of, I'm ready to go and I'm either going to punch you on the nose or I'm going to run like heck system. And then the other system is the one called rest and digest, as an easy way of naming it. And that's the one that calms us down, brings us back to our normal heart rate, makes everything just tick over very nicely, allows us to eat and digest our food. And that's the one really that we want to be predominant, during our day. But when things are not going the way we need them to, then that other system starts to predominate, and it puts us into this hyper-aroused, very stressed, lots of things going on in the body that are not supposed to occur for a long period of time. They're meant to be short-term fixes to things to get us out of trouble, not a chronic, ongoing situation. So I have stress hormones that are being released into the bloodstream that can be beneficial, again, in the short term, but over the long term, they're pretty harmful to us, right? So this is a situation that we often find ourselves in, if, as I said, things aren't going the way we need them to. So right now, in this pandemic, this is a classic kind of stressful situation for many, many people because we're not able to see our families, we're not able to do our usual social stuff. We're lucky in New Mexico that they're still allowing us to go outside and exercise in certain parts of the country, and back home in the UK, even that is under pressure, So they're in total lockdown. Like, I can't even fly into the UK right now without having to go to a designated hotel and pay tons of money to stay there for 2 weeks, to be in isolation for 2 weeks. So there are some very weird things going on, and it's okay for us to not be feeling good about things right now, right? So our emotions then can build up in our heads and in our bodies. There's quite a lot of research right now that your digestive system and your stomach reacts very strongly to your emotions. And so, you might feel a little bit nauseous, or you might feel like you can't eat, or you may have constipation, or you may have diarrhea, right? Everybody's body reacts in different ways. So can we find a way to let those emotions out, right? Can we express them in a way that is healthy, okay? So if I'm thinking something unpleasant about the scenario or about myself, right? So maybe I'm being hard on myself because I'm not managing this scenario as well as I think I should, right? Then can I find a way to express those emotions? The counselor, if you want to talk to a counselor, that can help, right? I've spent a lot of time doing counseling over the last few years, and it really helps to have someone outside your group that you can talk to who's not going to react to things that you say, right? Or it could be journaling, right? Maybe you're a writer, and journaling, writing things down, helps you to express these emotions, right? Can we use the right terminology to express what we're feeling. You know? And then personality can also play a role in how we react, right? Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? How does that influence your responses to what you're dealing with, right? So I wanted to just highlight a couple of things on this table because I think it's important that we recognize in ourselves, you know, am I healthy, right? Or am I kidding myself that I'm okay, right? And it can be useful if you can recognize it in other people as well, because it might change how you respond to those people, right? Can we be compassionate? Can we be at least empathetic if they're struggling, right? So if we're healthy, then we're very good at accepting ourselves. We don't kind of come down hard on ourselves all the time. We're perfectly equipped to deal with to be flexible and to deal with changing situations and environments. We have appropriate emotional responses to things, so we don't get really mad over something that is really quite minor, right? So again, you know, you guys are going to have to jump in, or you're going to hear a lot about my life. I have this really quick anger response to things, and that's something that I've spent a lot of time trying to learn to manage, because I'm kind of hyped up and stressed, and so it doesn't take very much to push my button, right? So it's taken me 2-3 years of continual counseling to get to a point where I'm like, okay, that's not the right response. There's absolutely no need to do that, right? I don't have to go there. It does me more damage than it does the person I'm getting angry at, or the thing I'm getting angry at, right? It's a waste of energy, it's a waste of time, and it doesn't resolve anything. But you have to put a space in between the trigger and the response, and it's learning to understand that space that is very, very difficult for some people, me included, right? So, can you function independently, right? Do you have appropriate goals for your life? And so, you know, our mental health can impact, remember our diagram from chapter 1, where we said that everything kind of interacted and affected other domains within our life. So our mental health is very important, and typically we understand what we have to do for our physical health. You as a group are probably taking part in most of those behaviors and strategies, right? You other than sleep, undergrads aren't great at getting enough sleep, but you're probably trying to do a bit of exercise, hopefully. Certainly by the end of the semester, when we've had our Friday activity day all semester, hopefully if you weren't someone that was active, perhaps that will, you know, show you how much fun it can be. But we're good at taking care of ourselves personally. If we don't feel well, we go to the doctor. Or if we're tired, we go to bed. Or, you know, we eat when we're hungry, right? But we forget about this and what's going on in here, right? And sometimes in here, okay? And we just squash it down because it's not important, or it's silly, I'm just being silly, right? So when you look at these tables and you read this chapter, again, it's not a question of, I'm not trying to probe or be nosy, right? If you want to share things, that would be lovely. If you don't, that's fine. But be honest with yourself as you're looking at the information in this chapter, right? Because you're the only one that can act to take care of yourself, okay? I'm going to skip the personality bit. There is a YouTube link there that you can take a look at, but I want to make sure that there's a few too many slides on here for one class. So the hierarchy, I think, is an interesting concept that they introduce here. So what Maslow believed was that people behave in response to their values, right, rather than their unconscious, subconscious kind of ethics or mores. So they'll drive their behavior based on what do I need, what's valuable, okay? So the needs that and it's a model, right? It doesn't mean you have to agree with the whole model. It doesn't mean that this is the only way to approach this idea. It's just one person's concept of how we could consider this, right? What are our needs that we have to provide for, right? So to survive, I have to have air, water, food, housing, sleep, sexual partner, hopefully, right? And if we've got those and we have that basic foundation, then the next thing we have to take care of is our safety. So is where we live safe? Is where we work safe? Where can we play that's safe, all right? And then the next level he felt was love, right? So I need to not only receive love from someone, from my family, from my friends, but I have to be able to give love back. And the older I get, the more I realize that the first person you have to love is you, right? It's very difficult to express love to other people if you don't like or love yourself. Okay? Is everything all right?
I was asking, go back in.
Okay.
It's just like,
All right, and then we need to have work, and we've got to be able to hold ourselves in some esteem. Self-esteem is a really interesting dynamic because it's different for different domains. Right, we do have a global self-esteem that's kind of the accumulation of all our little bits of self-esteem. But like, for example, it's if we're athletes, then we have quite high self-esteem in our movement capabilities, but we have maybe poor self-esteem in our maths ability, right? So these little bits of self-esteem in different domains all accumulate to our global picture, and we need that global picture to be positive about ourselves, right? If we manage all of that, then we're at a point, Maslow believed, where we could be what he called self-actualized, right? That we're at the point where we're ready to set goals, where we need to master challenges, where we have a need to achieve. As humans, we're achievement driven, right? But I can't get there if the lower layers aren't in place. Any questions or comments? right, so just some interesting terminology changes, I think. So psychological adjustment means that I'm able to make the adjustments necessary. I'm able to be flexible enough to manage the stresses that are going on in my life. And if I can do that, then that leads to psychological or mental health growth. Right? So psychologically healthy individuals can meet this demand of a constantly changing environment, right? And if I can adjust, then I'm learning that certain responses meet these demands more effectively than others, right? So that I can use my anger example here, right? So it can get kind of messed up a bit if we're having conflict in our lives, right? If I've got conflict with a parent or a sibling or a partner or even a best friend, right? So how do I deal with that conflict? Do I deal with aggression, right? So if I'm aggressive, I'm going to not only injure myself, but I'm going to injure someone else. And that might not be a physical injury. It might be I hurt their feelings, or I say something that's so mean that we can't get past it, right? So it doesn't have to be physical aggression. It can be verbal aggression, right? Psychological aggression. I can demean someone, right? Or I can use an assertiveness tactic in a conflict. So this way, I say, okay, but I have rights, right? I'm going to maintain my position, but that doesn't mean that I have to interfere with your rights and your position on something, right? But I don't have to back down if you can't persuade me that I'm in the wrong, right? So there's a slightly different approach if we use assertiveness rather than aggression. Okay? So can I compromise? Am I willing to compromise, right? Compromise is something that I think a lot of people struggle with. But if I want to resolve conflict in an important relationship, then we have to learn to compromise, right? So give me an example of a recent argument. Who do we have in class? Let's see. Okay. Tafari. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You drew the gold straw, Tafari. So give me an example of a recent argument you had with someone that was a family member or a good friend.
Yes, hello?
Or do you never argue with anyone?
No, so, yeah, I have, actually, recently I had an argument about eating good, eating healthy, and the results of what eating healthy does to your body with one of my cousins.
Uh-huh. Okay. Because you were trying to encourage him.
Yes.
You want him to eat more healthily. And he was resistant.
Yes.
Yeah?
Because he's a little on the heavy side. And he'd been watching YouTube videos about bodybuilders eating Snicker bars or whatever, and still like looking good or whatever. And I'm sitting here like, well, dude, ask them.
Okay. So, do you think you resolved the conflict? Or not?
No, he's very stubborn.
Okay. So you weren't able to constructively compromise yet. You're still working on that.
Yes, they're working.
Okay. So, you know, you could maybe take the tack of not eliminating Snickers bars if he likes them, right? But maybe encourage him to only eat one Snickers bar a week, perhaps, right? That would be a compromise on your behalf because you think he shouldn't eat them at all. And he thinks he can eat them and still be healthy and look good, right? So he would have to compromise and cut down, and you would have to compromise and allow him to have one or two of them, right?
Well, yes, ma'am. I don't believe in like actually cutting out all your sweets and all that good stuff. But he actually believes for him to lose weight, he can still eat the Snicker bars.
Yeah.
But just like that's it. Like he's trying to like eat one Snicker bar a day and feel like think he's gonna be healthy at the end of the day. Yeah.
That's gonna be a hard one to break. It's gonna be a hard one to break because, yeah, you're gonna be, you know, one of the problems that athletes have is they can get away with eating too much sweets, candy, things like that because of the amount of energy they are expending in training. And then when you retire from your competitive life, you have to be conscious enough to make a big change in your eating habits, right? So he's able to watch these bodybuilders who they expend a huge amount of calories every day in training. So yeah, they can eat a Snickers bar and it's not going to make any difference to them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, that's going to be a complicated one. All right, let's see. We already talked a little bit about self-esteem. As I said, self-esteem, we have a global self-esteem and then we have these pockets of self-esteem that are domain specific. The interesting thing about self-esteem is that it's based on my personal perception. It's not based on reality, right? So, you know, I think, let's see, I think my body image, my self-esteem about my body is very low, right? And people say, what are you talking about? You look great, you're in good shape, you know, what clothes hang on you really, what's the problem? It doesn't make any difference what other people say, right? It's my perception that impacts my self-esteem, okay? So again, that's something that can be very frustrating for the people around me, right? Because to change someone's belief system is very hard, right? Because it's rooted in experiences that they haven't had, okay? But you can see on this little model here that social interactions, appraisal, you know, getting positive feedback from family members, trying to teach kids. I think it's very important that we spend time teaching children not to be always comparing themselves to other people, right? That I need to compare myself to what I was yesterday, right? That's the key, not how am I compared to this person over here. Am I better than I was yesterday? Did I work harder today than I did yesterday? Did I don't know, was I kinder today than I was yesterday, right? That's something that I think we need to spend more time teaching children so that they have better self-esteem, right? Okay, so what are some of the things we can do to improve our mental health, our psychological health? So we know that there are lifestyle strategies that we can implement, all right? So it's important that we get regular physical activity. It doesn't necessarily have to be an exercise plan, right? It can be, but just, walking the dog or doing the housework or doing the yard work, right? There are other ways to be physically active that don't necessarily incorporate formal exercise routines, right? But if I enjoy formal exercise routines, then that's fine. But it's the movement, a regular gross motor movement strategy that's important, right? Trying to get adequate sleep. So that's a minimum of 8 hours a night for adults, okay? As I said, students typically don't get 8+ hours sleep a night, so that's something that you might want to think about, and then when you graduate, how are you gonna arrange your life so that you get 8 hours, okay? And eating well, as Tafari says, you know that if I eat well, then it fuels my body to be physically active and, keep me healthy. I'm not going to develop cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes, right? We don't need those health issues, okay? Improving our intellectual health and our spiritual needs. We mentioned a little bit about that in chapter 1, right? So you guys are in college, you're doing a good job here of working on your intellectual health, right? And then when you graduate, what you need to do is make sure, what am I going to do now to keep working on intellectual health, right? It doesn't stop just because I graduate. What do I learn next? What am I interested in, okay? And then we mentioned spiritual health. It doesn't have to be religion. It can be religion. For many people it is, but it doesn't have to be. There are other ways to attend to spiritual health, right? Foster social contacts, right? So if we improve these other aspects of our life, they all impact psychological health, right? Can we take care of our environment? Remember that this model in the book, slightly different to the other one that I showed you when we did chapter 1, that this model represents the idea that everything sits within a healthy environment. Okay? So, how do I foster a healthy environment? Right? That could literally be the environment, like we'll talk about plastic pollution and things like that later on in the semester. But it has to start with your immediate environment, right? Do I feel safe when I go home? One of the problems that Chief Malden talked about last week with you was that we've seen a rise because of the pandemic and people being isolated, that we've seen a rise in domestic violence, right? That's not a safe environment. Can I remove myself from that? Or if I'm going to work and every day I'm being harassed by my boss, or I'm under heaps of stress to achieve something that can't be done in the timeline they're asking for it. And can I change that environment somehow? Okay, so how much time have I got here? Okay. So this is something that I really wanted to pull out and highlight with you. Again, in the pandemic situation, people are having much more struggles with their mental health than under normal circumstances. But I think that it's important to understand the difference between I'm someone who's typically mentally healthy, but this is just difficult, you know, I'm not enjoying this time. Or I suddenly start doing something that's inappropriate, like losing my temper, when typically I don't lose my temper, right? That's not quite the same as someone who has mental illness, all right? So having the odd disturbing thought that comes in and then goes away isn't mental illness, all right? Mental illness means this individual is having abnormal responses on a continual basis, right? These disturbing thoughts and ideas are persistent. They don't go away. You don't wake up the next day and they're gone. They're there all the time, right? They often have things, you know, things get to a point where these thoughts and these ideas actually start to interfere with school or work or my personal relationships, right? And when you're not the person suffering with that, it can be very difficult to understand what that individual is going through, right? It's really easy and it helps not one jot when the person you care about says, come on, just pull yourself together, right? That does not, it doesn't help. It just doesn't help, right? And it's hard for that other person to understand, don't you think I would pull myself together if I could pull myself together? Like, I'm not doing this on purpose, okay? So, I want to be able to share those kinds of ideas because, you know, I live with this all the time. Here we go again. You get my whole life. My whole life. I live with this all the time. I'm on medication all the time. I have been in counseling for years. There was a specific trigger this time around, 5 or 6 years ago, and I've just been lucky that I was in a place in my life where I was really, this time I was like, okay, this time we're going to deal with this properly, right? And it's been really hard for my family and my partner to cope with what I've been going through. Because they want to make it better, A, right? They don't want me to be struggling. And B, they don't understand why I'm struggling, because I have a great life. I do. I have a great life. What do I have to struggle about, right? I've got a lovely partner, I have a good job, I have a house, right? So it's very difficult if you are someone who loves someone who is dealing with mental illness to really, there's a difference between being sympathetic, which doesn't help much, and empathetic, where you are able to give that person the space to do what they need to do, right? So these are just some characteristics that, again, you can think of. Be honest with yourself. Which column do I go in? Or do I have a bit of both columns, right? Or do I know someone who might be in the right-hand column a lot, in your opinion, from the outside, right? right? So occasional disturbing thoughts, inappropriate behavior, losing my temper, right? It goes away. Versus persistent, they're there all the time, right? This strong emotion. So for me, it was my mum dying. And the feeling of loss and emptiness and anger and all these other things just would not go away. It didn't matter, right? It just didn't matter how long we went on for from her passing. Nothing got easier every day. These overwhelming emotions were there, right? And so it's, it's just, you have to, it takes a lot of time, I think, to recognize that you're not okay, right? And what I love at the moment is there's so much positive work going on around mental illness right now. That, people who are media stars are coming out and supporting helplines and things like that, right? There's a lot of positive media around mental health at the moment, and people are trying to encourage people to take care of their mental health. No one can help me. I have to do it. First thing I have to do is admit that I'm not okay, right? And that's the big step. That's hard, because I'm supposed to be okay. I'm supposed to manage everything. I'm supposed to be okay, right? And in here, it's not okay, right? So I have to be willing to drop the facade that I'm putting on to myself and everybody else. That's the hard bit, right? So you can see that the data in this chapter says that we have many, many adults in this country who are exhibiting signs of mental stress and possible long-term illness, but less than 50% of adults are going and getting help, right? So a significant barrier to that is the cost of getting help, right? Even with good insurance, it's still quite expensive to go and get help, right? And a lot of people who are at risk don't have good insurance, or maybe don't have any insurance, right? So that's a problem that we don't, it's not, help isn't readily available, which is why I like the idea of some of these phone helplines and internet help and things like that, because that's something that people without insurance can access, right? Then it's important to understand that for many, many people with mental illness, right, there's actual chemical changes going on in their brain. That's why sometimes people will respond very well to drug treatment, because the drugs block certain things that are going on in the brain, and that can help manage your mood swings or these thought patterns, right? So if I've got depression and I can afford to go and see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I can afford to get the prescription, then the changes can be very dramatic, right? So for the people around this individual, the changes are real obvious sometimes, right? I'm gonna skip because I want to get to this, all right? because we have a huge problem with this, and the college population is one of the ones that we're seeing an increase in this. So suicide isn't mental illness, but it's often the consequence of mental illness or substance abuse. So it can be that someone is struggling with depression, and that day they just could not manage their depression. The suicide rate in the States has gone up nearly 25% in the past 10 to 15 years. And it's the second leading cause of death for Americans between 15 and 34. So your age group, right? So that's really concerning because you can't come back, right? It's done if you go there. I'm lucky to know a young lady who I may see if she's available to talk to you later in the semester. But she was a student here, and she attempted suicide. Luckily, her roommate found her and got her to the emergency room in time to save her life. And I'll be forever grateful because she's a wonderful human being. She is funny, she is smart, and it would have been such a loss. And we've become friends since, you know, it was a long time ago now, but I've been here forever. It was a long time ago. But since when she came back, I helped her to complete her coursework, and then when she graduated, she stayed in touch, and we've become good friends. And you know, as I said, I'll be forever grateful that her roommate found her in time, but that doesn't always happen, okay? Yesterday, I was talking to, I have, one of my best friends is faculty and head of kinesiology at OSU, Ohio State, the Ohio State, sorry, and she told me that the day before she had got an emergency text on her phone from the university that something had happened to one of the students. Turned out it was one of her students had committed suicide and was found in their car, right? And she's like, I didn't even know that they were in that much pain, that they were that close to doing something irreversible, right? So she feels awful, of course, because she feels like, oh, you know, if I had recognized it, I could have done something. It's not her fault, right? She's not responsible. But that doesn't make the people around that individual feel any better, right? And what was that person going through that they couldn't manage? Right? So this is someone your age, right? It would have been so much better if that person had just called the counseling services, right? Or just told their best friend that they were feeling suicidal, right? If anybody ever tells you that they're feeling suicidal and they've got suicidal ideologies, you need to get them to go and get help, right? Because once you know, if you don't do something and that person commits suicide, you will not like yourself for a very long time, right? So take any signs, right? If someone is communicating something to you that indicates that they're thinking that maybe suicide is the only way out of what they're not managing to deal with, right? Then get help for that person, right? So here's this table, I think, is a really useful set of information. Here's some warning signs that you can maybe just tuck away in the back of your brain, and you might find it useful sometime. And then we've got a 1-800 number. As I said, there are several other helplines now. I'm a big royal family fan, so I'm very much into Prince William and Prince Harry are deeply involved in mental health prevention and mental health management, and so you can just Google them and things will come up. So, I talk too much, as always. Anybody got any questions or thoughts, just quickly? I know it's time to finish, but...
Yes, ma'am. I got that question. That's not too far.
Okay.
So, yeah, the chapter 2 quiz. I sent you an email. I don't know if you've seen that or not. I sent it through Outlook. Is that okay?
No! You gotta email me through Blackboard.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, yeah, there's a password on the quiz.
Oh, no, that was, okay, so no, the quiz shuts at time for class, the day that Wednesday, Monday. So the quiz shuts at 9 o'clock on Monday mornings.
Oh.
Because it's a pre-chapter quiz, and then Monday class time is doing the work in the chapter and reading the chapter more thoroughly and doing your application questions, right? The test with the password on it was because Blackboard kicked someone out. So I just gave them an opportunity to take it. Okay?
Yeah, so, okay, so Mondays, is that actual class, or we're just, if we have questions?
If you have questions, Monday. I'll always dial in at 9 o'clock on Monday, but there's not, that class is your time, because this is a 100 level class, right? So I have to assess you. I need you to do work. If you were here in class, we would do those application questions here in class. And so my way of coping with being online is to allow you Monday to do the chapter work and really dive into the chapter and think about yourself and do that. And then I'm just I'm there to help if you've got questions. And then Wednesdays will be chat time. So hopefully you guys will start throwing stuff at me. And so I don't stand here and talk for an hour, because that's probably very dull. And then Fridays we're going to do our activity stuff. Okay?
Okay, yes, well.
All right?
Yes, well.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, have a lovely day, people. Enjoy the rest of your day and make the most of getting outside before it's 22 degrees. And I will see you Friday morning.